Now that the shitstorm of new gameplay information and sponsored content has finally calmed down a little bit, I decided to make a video on something that I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time, except I simply wasn't able to because I was under NDA. And that topic is, as you might have guessed by the title of this video, the map, because most of you have probably seen by now from all the newer gameplay footage that the map is exclusively limited to the middle part of Manhattan. So, what happened here is something that you could ask. Is the current map big enough? How come that we had such a wrong impression about the size of this thing? And who is responsible for that? That is what today's video is about. So let's begin. For those who haven't really caught up to it yet, it seems that this is the map that will be available to us in the final game, which if we were to put that area on the real-life Google Maps map of Manhattan, it would come down to around this area. It's not an exact one-to-one copy, but that's because the game itself isn't an exact one-to-one copy either. The map in the game currently counts a total of 22 districts, including 6 Dark Zone districts, 15 PvE districts, and one big social hub area named Camp Hudson, which can be found in the bottom left. These together make up the whole playable area for the Division. And yeah, guys, that means no Brooklyn, no Jersey, no Queens, no Bronx, no Central Park, and none of the areas that we've seen in the trailers from 2013. So first thing, do I think that this is too small? The short answer is no. I don't think that it is too small. For the long answer, we're going to have to go back in time just a little bit to the year 2013 and see how things unfold from that point on. Because the end of the 2013 trailer was without a doubt the very first sight of a map that we got. And I remember when I first saw this that I thought it was pretty big, especially considering that the game would have no vehicles. I would be more than fine if this were to be the final map. And in fact, if we compare this map to the one that we currently have, you will see that it is around the same size. So again, no, I do not think that the map is too small or that it is scaled back a lot, but I believe that isn't the real problem that you guys are having with it. I'm pretty sure that the real problem is the hype that was around the size and the way that it got pushed. We all expected something way bigger. So how is that possible? How is it possible that we thought it was gonna be so much more? The hype for the size of the map started when the developers posted this picture of Brooklyn on their Twitter with the quote, "What areas of New York City would you like to explore in The Division?" But looking back at that, it seems pretty clear to me now that the developers had a different vision for their game, as the area that is currently in the final game is not even on this image. But fair is fair, during the development plans changed for the developers. At this point, I don't really think that too much harm is done. So let's fast forward a year to GDC 2014, where they made a trailer about their engine and where they both showed new and older areas from Brooklyn. And a few months after that, at E3 2014, they showed an area that was not even on the original image, which was Midtown of Manhattan. At this point in time, I'd say that the developers must have known what they were doing. They had gameplay ready about Manhattan. They had a clear vision of their game now. And I feel like that they must have known that Brooklyn wasn't going to be a part of their map at this point. And yet, during the whole of E3, there was no single mention of this. Developers were saying in interviews that the play space will mostly be Manhattan, implying that Brooklyn would still also be in the game. On the other end of the spectrum, we now have a hyped up community going crazy with theories about the map and what the map could be. I even made it part of my trailer breakdown where I showed off just how big the map is if we were to combine all these smaller maps together that had been released so far. The result was literally insanely big. But you would think that at some point the developers would want to put a hold on this so that people do not end up having unrealistic expectations. But then a couple of months later that year, on September the 26th of 2014, they released another Snowdrop presentation trailer, where again they showed off smaller clips of the game in new areas that we hadn't seen before. Now, after doing a little bit of research on those locations, I eventually figured out that one of them was actually located in Brooklyn, even more south than that we originally expected the border of the map to be. I posted a video on that topic on the 30th of January 2015, and instead of the developers coming out and saying, hey, you know, we decided to go with another area of New York because, well, this particular area has more famous landmarks, which is really what we're going for, they decided to share the video and kind of made it official by calling my research spot on and calling me a true detective. Now, I'm not going to lie, being featured was and still is very cool. It gave my channel some more exposure. That was also really nice, of course, but they made this article and gave me the exposure on the 4th of March 2015, and again at that point, they must have known for sure that Brooklyn would not be in the game anymore, but instead they feature a video where I figure out that Brooklyn is still part of the game, so they pretty much confirm themselves that the information is correct, although they don't do it directly. Now remember, this is also around the time when the expectations for the map size got even bigger, because I did some research comparing it to GTA 5 where I copied the movement of the players in the first trailer and came up with almost an exact scale. It ended up being like really big. And then at this year's E3 presentation we learned that the game would only have one big dark zone and that the dark zone would be around 1/4 of the final map. And because I was over there and I was able to play the demo, I was able to locate the east, south and west border of the dark zone. The only thing that I didn't know is where it would end up going north. And when looking at it, I felt that the information didn't quite add up. Because you have to remember, the dark zone was 1/4 of the map, and if the map would really be that big, that would mean that the dark zone would be really narrow and go all the way up, all the way past Central Park. Or the other solution, the whole map just wasn't going to be that big. So I lowered my own expectations. I made a video about it saying, hey, the image of that map that they released, yeah, that's probably not going to be the whole map. And, you know, the dark zone is like 1/4 of the map, so I guess we have to scale our expectations down a little bit. And after that, they could have just left it at that. But then, in very recent footage that they released, they showed a player walking in the streets of Brooklyn and near the Manhattan Bridge. So it was pretty much out of the question for everybody that Brooklyn would be removed. Why else would you post footage of it? And as most of you know, at that point I had already played the alpha. I made a couple of videos about that. I think that Brooklyn would not be in the game. And I had plenty of evidence for that, but I just couldn't share it because I was under the NDA. But most people, they just didn't believe me or they didn't know and they thought that Brooklyn would still be in the game and how could it not? And after all these years of waiting, you have all these players expecting this immensely huge map that they pretty much hyped up. It isn't that the map is small, that's not the problem. For a game without vehicles, I think the map is more than enough. In fact, like I said, the map is probably around as big as that it originally was going to be in the very first trailer. But what bothers me, and what probably bothers a lot of other people as well, is that in all these years of development, they posted all these pictures and had all these interviews claiming all these things about the map. But they never came out and said it that the plans had changed a little bit and that they decided to go with another location. And I know that I myself am partly to blame here for making all these theory videos and taking things like a metro map in the E3 trailer a little bit out of proportion. Because that is what I did in some cases. I took things out of proportion. When breaking the trailer down, I spotted a mission icon in the Jersey City area, and that instantly made me think that players would be able to visit Jersey City. And again, when I saw this huge ass map that they posted on their Twitter, I took that out of proportion and thought it was going to be the map of the game. But I mean, if something was posted like this by the official developers, you would think that it at least has some legitimacy to it, right? But that aside, I know what it is like when people take things out of proportion. I recently had a beta code giveaway, and then when I posted on Twitter that something exciting was going down today, everybody took that out of proportion and pretty much expected it to be a beta release date, which it wasn't. But what did I do? Well, I went over to the Reddit post and wrote down that it was in fact not a beta release date. And I kept replying to people on Twitter that it wasn't going to be a beta release date. I did this so that people wouldn't have unrealistic expectations and would not end up being disappointed. Now I know that some people still ended up being disappointed because they didn't read the post or they hoped for a beta release date anyway. But that's their problem. I put the information out there. I did my job. And that is something that in all these years the PR team for the Division didn't do. They let the hype build up, encouraged it, and even supported it, even though they knew themselves that part of what people were hyped for would not be in the game. The result is that even though the map that they currently have seems to be more than enough, a lot of people are still disappointed by the size of it, and they have every right to be. Now, a lot of people have brought up that Brooklyn might return in the form of DLC later down the road, but I personally believe that when they decide on expanding the map, it will probably be an expansion up north so that they can extend the Dark Zone as well as the size of the PvE areas while still keeping everything connected. The developers have a very big policy on not having any loading screens, and adding back Brooklyn will undeniably result in a loading screen unless they actually want to connect the two areas through also recreating everything that's in between, which, to be honest with you, I just don't see happening. That's way too much work. But yeah, that was pretty much it for today's video. As always, I will see you guys later.